Autumn 2025 will be remembered for empty fuel pumps, not falling leaves, as communities across the Midwest found themselves facing a crisis few had anticipated. Instead of the usual seasonal routines, Americans woke up to the reality of shuttered gas stations, anxious commutes, and a growing sense of uncertainty about what tomorrow might bring. It all began when a simmering trade dispute with Canada erupted into a full-blown energy crisis, sending shockwaves through the heart of the American Midwest and beyond. The border, once a symbol of cooperation, now became a flashpoint for economic tension. Canada, America's largest and most dependable energy supplier, retaliated against new U.S. tariffs by slashing oil exports. This sudden move disrupted the delicate balance between the two economies, exposing just how much the U.S. relies on its northern neighbor for energy security. Long lines at gas stations in Michigan and Minnesota became daily reminders of a political gamble gone wrong. Frustration and anxiety grew as drivers waited hours for fuel, only to find supplies had run dry. For many, the crisis felt personal, affecting jobs, families, and daily life. President Trump's decision to impose a 25% tariff on Canadian steel and aluminum triggered swift Canadian countermeasures. But the real shock came when Ottawa threatened, and then delivered, cuts to oil exports. A move that few in Washington had truly expected. Industry leaders initially dismissed the threat, convinced that the two nations' energy systems were too deeply intertwined for such drastic action. Many believed cooler heads would prevail and that economic logic would win out over political brinkmanship. But with talks stalled and economic pain mounting on both sides of the border, Canada made the high-stakes move, hoping to force Washington back to the negotiating table. The standoff grew more tense as public protests and political pressure mounted in both countries. The announcement in September sent oil prices soaring overnight, rattling global markets and leaving Midwestern states scrambling to secure alternative supplies. As their main energy lifeline was suddenly choked off, panic buying and price gouging became common. The once reliable flow of Canadian oil had become a weapon in a high-stakes economic battle, and the consequences for ordinary Americans were immediate and severe, fueling uncertainty, hardship, and a growing demand for answers. America's dependence on Canadian oil is massive, far greater than most people realize. Every day, millions of barrels of crude flow across the border, fueling not just cars and trucks, but the entire U.S. economy. This relationship is deeply woven into the fabric of North American energy. Canada supplies nearly 60% of U.S. oil imports, with over 4 million barrels a day flowing south. These pipelines and railcars form a vital artery, connecting Alberta's oil sands to American refineries and consumers. Without this steady stream, the U.S. would face immediate and severe shortages. This isn't just trade, it's the backbone of U.S. energy security, especially in the Midwest. The region's industries, transportation networks, and even households rely on this constant supply to keep running smoothly. Refineries in states like Michigan, Illinois, and North Dakota are built specifically for Canadian crude, delivered by a vast pipeline network. These facilities are optimized for the unique properties of Canadian oil, making them highly efficient, but also highly dependent. When that supply is cut, these refineries can't simply switch to other sources. Logistical hurdles make quick fixes impossible. Retooling for different grades of oil is costly and time-consuming, leaving plants idle and workers anxious. The Midwest, landlocked and pipeline-dependent, is uniquely vulnerable to this kind of shock. With few alternative supply routes, any disruption can quickly ripple through the region, affecting everything from fuel prices to food delivery. Until now, this integration was a source of stability for both countries. The seamless flow of oil fostered economic growth, job creation, and reliable energy for millions on both sides of the border. The crisis has shattered that illusion, exposing a critical vulnerability at the heart of the U.S. economy. Suddenly, the risks of over-reliance on a single foreign supplier are impossible to ignore. Empty gas stations in Minneapolis and Detroit are a stark lesson in the dangers of taking this lifeline for granted. The shockwaves serve as a wake-up call, forcing policymakers and the public to rethink the true cost of energy security. As Canada's export cuts took effect, panic swept the Midwest. Gas prices spiked by the hour, and stations in Minnesota and Wisconsin ran dry within days. Social media exploded with images of no gas signs and frustrated drivers. Panic buying made shortages worse, with long lines and tempers flaring. Michigan declared a state of emergency, rationing fuel and restricting sales. The crisis rippled outward, schools considered remote learning, trucking companies struggled, and supply chains faltered. Small businesses faced soaring costs, and commuters were left stranded. The Midwest, cut off from its energy lifeline, became the epicenter of chaos. The invisible flow of oil had stopped, and daily life ground to a halt. The US-Canada energy relationship is built on a vast integrated pipeline network, an engineering marvel that stretches for thousands of miles across forests, prairies, and rivers. This network is not just a feat of construction, but a testament to the vision and collaboration of two neighboring nations, working together to fuel their economies and support millions of lives on both sides of the border. It stands as a symbol of decades of cooperation, trust, and shared prosperity, with both countries relying on each other to keep the energy flowing smoothly and efficiently. Pipelines like the Enbridge mainline move millions of barrels of oil and petroleum products every single day, crossing borders seamlessly and linking refineries, industries, and communities in both countries. These arteries of energy are essential for transportation, manufacturing, and even heating homes, making them a lifeline for countless people. When Canada restricts exports, it risks cutting off its own eastern provinces, highlighting the mutual dependence built into the system. The interconnectedness means that any disruption can have ripple effects, not just for one country, but for both, affecting jobs, prices, and even energy security. The 1977 Transit Pipelines Treaty was meant to prevent this kind of disruption, forbidding either nation from blocking energy flows in transit. This agreement was a recognition of how vital these pipelines are, and how easily political tensions could threaten the stability of the entire system. Violating this treaty would trigger a deeper diplomatic and legal crisis, threatening all cross-border infrastructure and potentially sparking economic retaliation or long-term damage to the partnership. The pipelines bind both nations in a delicate balance. Each needs the other to keep energy flowing, and any breakdown in trust could have far-reaching consequences for both societies. But weaponizing oil exports strains this system to the breaking point, revealing just how fragile the relationship truly is beneath the surface. The pressure on these pipelines is not just physical, but political and economic as well. The steel pipelines are strong, engineered to withstand the harshest conditions, but the trust that keeps them flowing is now dangerously eroded, reminding us that even the most robust infrastructure is only as resilient as the partnership that sustains it. Canada's move to restrict oil exports is a risky act of self-harm. The US buys nearly all of Canada's oil exports. Cutting off this revenue devastates Alberta and the national economy. With nowhere to store excess oil, producers are forced to shut down wells, an expensive, damaging process. Canada's over-reliance on a single market has become a glaring vulnerability. The Trans Mountain Pipeline to the Pacific offers some hope, but its capacity is a fraction of what's lost. If the US finds new suppliers, Canada may struggle to regain its market, risking long-term damage to its reputation. The gamble for leverage could leave Canada weaker and more isolated than ever. Canada's export restrictions have ignited fierce political battles at home, especially with Alberta, which owns the oil and opposes Ottawa's move. Alberta's premier threatens legal action, arguing the federal government is overstepping its authority and risking jobs. Industry leaders warn the move will damage Canada's reputation and deter investment. Internationally, the 1977 Transit Pipelines Treaty complicates matters. While Ottawa restricts exports, it risks violating the spirit of cross-border cooperation. The US could challenge the restrictions under trade agreements, leading to costly legal battles. President Trump dismisses the need for Canadian oil, vowing to boost US production, while industry experts warn the situation is far more complex. The CEO of Enbridge calls the move unwise, echoing a consensus that this conflict will leave both countries worse off. The political and legal fallout is just beginning, with no easy resolution in sight. With its US market in jeopardy, Canada is scrambling to diversify its energy exports, especially to Asia. The expanded Trans Mountain Pipeline offers a Pacific route, but its capacity is limited. Building new trade relationships takes time, and Canada's reliability as a supplier is now in question. Ottawa is also considering leveraging critical minerals, threatening new export restrictions that could disrupt US supply chains. The crisis has turned economic interdependence into a weapon, deepening the rift between the two countries. For Canada, it's a harsh lesson in vulnerability. For the US, a warning against taking its energy partners for granted. The once stable North American energy system is now a battleground, and the path to rebuilding trust will be long and uncertain. The future of continental cooperation hangs in the balance, forever changed by this costly conflict.